wizard to go and create my service. And here we go. We've got several files that have been created. The first one, testservice.cs, is the main service. I'll go through each of these and point out some of the important features. There's also a thing called a manifest, which allows you to run your service, and another file called servicetypes.cs. This one contains information about how you interact with the service. So you remember I specified my company as the namespace. I've got a contract identifier here, and again, here's the URL showing you that it's mycompany.com 2009-07, and it's called test service. That identifier is unique. There should only ever be one service with that name, so it allows us to distinguish between services. Further down, we've got a service state. Now at the moment the service state is empty. For the purposes of this exercise, I'm going to go and add something. I'm going to pretend that this is actually a sensor, and so I'll create a new field in here. I need to mark it though as a data member field, which means that it will be exposed and available to external services to have a look at and be able to read this value. And it also needs to be public, therefore. So I'll make that public, and I'll make it a double, and I'll call it test value. Oh, sorry, sensor value. Okay, so I've actually got a property now in my state. Further down you see a list of the operations that this particular service supports. Now by default you already have lookup, drop, get and subscribe because I ticked the box that said I wanted to use subscriptions. Get allows me to get the current state of the service, which right now only has this one value, sensor value. Subscribe allows another service to say please notify me whenever your state changes. And further down you'll see these different classes here, one for get and another one down further for subscribe, that are specific to this particular service. Now that I've actually created something in the service state, I can run it and see what happens. So I'll simply compile that and run it in the debugger. That starts up what we call a DSS node. It runs something called DSS host, and then it starts up the service inside that. Now I can use a web browser to have a look at the service state. So if I bring over a web browser here, the service is running on a port 50,000. So if I look at localhost, which is my machine, port 50,000, then I will see this page, which is the home page for Robotics Studio. I can have a look at the service directory, and down here we've got the test service that we've just created. If I click on the test service, I see the state of the service, which says there's a timestamp, there's a unique ID, and so on. I'm not particularly interested in that right now, but it does actually have a field here called sensor value, which currently is 0 because of course I haven't put anything in there. Alright, let's get rid of the web browser, stop this, and we'll go back to the test service itself. Inside the main testservice.cs you'll find that test service is subclassed off DSSP service base. That simply says that this is going to be a service. I can have a look at the definition of DSSP service base very simply by right mouse clicking and then saying go to definition, and that shows me all of the things that are available in DSSP service base. I can have a look at that. I can do it a different way. I can simply type in somewhere, as you can see here, base.start. If I type base dot, then IntelliSense kicks in, and you can see all of the methods and properties that are available inside the DSSP service base class. So there's a lot of helper functions and things in there. We don't need to use most of those at the moment, so I'll just get rid of that. In the service itself, the first thing you have is an instance of the service state. So I added a field to this a moment ago. We've got this thing called test service state. I make a new instance of that. I have something called a service port, which is where incoming messages are sent to, and that implements all of these operations, which, as I showed you a moment ago, are over here. So we have a set of operations that can be accepted by this service. And lastly here, if you want people to be able to subscribe, you need a subscription manager. So this is added automatically by the wizard. Every service has something called a start method. In the start method, you do your initialization. So for example, I could poke a value into the service state. So rather than the sensor value being 0, it could be some other number. I'm not going to do it that way. Instead, what I'll do is put in some random number so that the value changes constantly to make it simulate a sensor. I'll come to that in a moment. Notice down the bottom here also I've got a handler which is marked with an attribute. The attributes are in square brackets here. That says it's a service handler. What DSS will do for you is figure out from the signature, which says this has got a subscribe message, it'll figure out what particular handler it is and how to hook it up to the operation, which is over here, subscribe. And that's done automatically for you at runtime. It does those connections. So whenever a subscribe message arrives, this particular handler will be called, and it uses one of the built-in functions in DSSP Service Base to say, I just want to add this person to my subscription list. And then the subscription manager handles it all for you. We did display the service state a moment ago using the web browser. In order to do that, we effectively used the get operation, but you'll notice that there's no get operation handler